Boom, got it. Yes, smarter than I look.
Well, I feel like Zoom
Awesome.
always changes too. That's what we always say at around our team. We're always like, did it change? Did
Did it
something change? Yeah.
move? It grew legs and walked away from me. All good. We're recording. We've got a handful of folks in here. I'll let the number plateau, Tiffany, and then we'll get rocking and rolling. Couple
Great.
of housekeeping items, you guys. You heard us that little debacle. It is recording. If you need to drop off for any reason, no worries. We will send a follow up later today or this week with the call recording, any resources or anything that we discussed today. I think that's about it. Did I miss anything? All right, you guys. Well, for the sake of time, let's just get going. I'm so grateful, Tiffany, that you are generous enough to share your time and your wisdom with our community today. Hot topic, advisor marketing. And so, with that, Tiffany, why don't I give you a second to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get going through some of these questions people submitted.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thanks for having me. I'm Tiffany Silverberg. I am the Senior Marketing Strategy Director at Out and About Communications. So we are a first full service marketing agency specializing in financial services, specifically with RIAs and advisors. We work with anyone from about 350 million up to about 3 billion. But really, we're all about helping advisors at firms that are just on that tipping point of scaling of growth. So they've been DIYing or kind of, as you and I were just talking about, like grabbing all the tactics here and there, and they're really ready to like get arms around it, get the marketing figured out, figure out what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then getting systems in place. So we have a whole team behind us of implementers and strategists and every kind of expert you can imagine. So, we're really all about getting those systems into place. I've been with Out and About for about 8 years, and I love having these conversations. I was telling in our team, I feel like this is like my job every day is, hopping into calls with our clients anyway and like figuring it out and what we're doing and where we're going. So, an Ask Me Anything is kind of perfect. It's what I do every day. So,
Love it. Well, thank you for sitting in the hot seat today. People have submitted some really good questions. And the agenda that I put together, like, let's start with the bad news and then let's talk about the solution. And so,
yes.
some of the things I gleaned from whether it's social media or LinkedIn or whatever, some of the questions that people submitted, I'm curious to know your thoughts behind like where do marketing efforts most often break down? We were kind of talking about this before we jumped on here, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say it's two things. It's what we were just talking about. So it's sort of trying everything and like letting the next latest sales pitch that you've seen drive your marketing. Right? Because it's all over everywhere, social, whatever that you're seeing. Like, you need to try this, and this gained, this many leads, and, do this and do that. And so we get into so many conversations of like, well, we apparently need to do this because we saw that it works.
Mhm.
And so not knowing what works for you. And then I think along the same vein is just not knowing your own core messaging and positioning and sort of your starting point and what makes you different and really owning that.
Yeah.
And I think especially with, the teams that we work with, just making sure that everyone has the buy-in and everyone is kind of the same, everyone's being driven by the same train, essentially. So I think those are the two areas that it really breaks down the fastest.
I get that. What is your process for helping people identify their brand and their voice and like the vision behind like the I'm asking this because before we jumped on, I said I had worked for an advisor that marketed for the sake of marketing. Like he felt like he had to check these boxes every month, but it
Yes.
didn't really move the needle. And I think it's because like what you were just saying, we saw what other people were doing and just tried to copy it, and it didn't really feel very authentic. It didn't represent our brand or our vision or our mission or the core values or like the messaging and what
Yes.
made us
Yes.
unique and special. So I'm really curious how you guys help folks like that develop that brand and that clarity and the vision, because I find like even in my own business that's where the momentum starts to pick up.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, so I don't even know where to start because it can go so many ways. I mean, it's in our onboarding process in the first place. It's really making sure
Okay.
that we're talking with the stakeholders and the leadership, and making sure that, we're just having conversations around, like you said, who is that target market? Who are you best serving? And where do you want to go from a growth perspective? I think sometimes this is where it can break down to is having the conversations about like where's the firm going?
Yeah.
Are we looking to hire in the next few years? Are we doing M&A type of activity? Like, just really getting a sense of just what the momentum of and goals of the firm itself. And then I think the other part, I think you just said it, being authentic and to your core. So also just having those conversations around, what are the tactic, sometimes, we talk with teams and they're like, you know what? We just newsletters are not going to work for us. We've had,
Yeah.
these experiences, these things with our clients, whatever. So it's the hard lines. And so, there's a place for client education, but also just understanding what's going to work authentically. And then we can kind of put all the pieces together from there. But, I think it's just having those really honest conversations. Um, and yeah, like you said, that target market, having a good understanding of who you best serve and who you want to best serve. And it doesn't have to be, and we can get into this. I know we're going to get into this. It doesn't always have to look like the traditional niche, but like you
Sure.
said, what kind of work are you doing that's different than everyone else, and how are you doing it differently? So making sure that we
And
have
so
clarity there.
how do you spot that? Do you just like look at your book of business and pick your like top three clients and figure out what their pain points are and just start like targeting those?
Well, we can. I mean, it also it depends on the structure of the firm. I mean, ops, it's in your name, right? The operations
Sure.
side. So, sometimes depending on the size of the firm, sometimes it does look like that. Like
Yeah.
where do we just want to put all our energy behind? We just want to go after, the stereotypical example of dentists, right? We're just all
Mhm.
going after dentists. But sometimes, each advisor, there's advisor teams, and each team is going after a different um, market or niche or whatever, but we're taking a step back and going, okay, but as a firm, what are our values? What are our investment philosophies? Things
Yeah.
like that are really holding together all those different teams or niches.
I
So,
can appreciate that.
yeah.
What kind of along the same vein, what are some of like whether it's trendy or just like misconceptions that you find advisors have about marketing?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is just that like one tactic is going to drive all your business. Like if you just
Mm,
turn on this kind of ad or
mm.
start this new campaign, whatever it's going to be, is going to yeah, it's going to drive all the leads through your door.
So the strategy evolves, or the strategy can evolve, and you need to. How does somebody like stay ahead of that? Do you just, I mean, you track like the data and the metrics, and if it plateaus, you got to get creative again, or what?
Oh yeah, I mean definitely that. Definitely making sure that we're watching the KPI. So that's something we do internally is really narrow down, first of all, and again, we'll probably get into this, but really getting a sense of, which pieces of marketing, which sort of tactics
Yeah.
we want to be doing and how they relate. We're all about making sure that things are connecting back. So we're not just, I always say I don't like marketing just looks like little plates that are spinning or little tops spinning everywhere, like activity that isn't going anywhere. So making sure that they're all connected. Um, but then also, sorry, my brain just stopped. If you see chaos, I have a giant 120-pound dog here who thinks it's lunchtime. So
Oh
I
my gosh.
apologize. Like you saw that just move. Um, so yeah, so it's the connecting of the dots, and then also I think just to clarify what I was saying earlier, it's not so much that one tactic or another we need to like shift. I think the bigger misconception is just that like one particular thing. Sometimes we'll talk with clients or prospects and they'll just say like, well, I was talking with my friend and he started Facebook ads and now he's got all these leads. And that might be the right tactic or it might not, but just there's generally not just one thing that we need to like turn that thing on and then everything will be fixed. It's usually um, like we talked about, like the systems and going in and making sure that all the messaging aligns and we're following up and all that kind of stuff. So there's rarely just like one thing. If we just do this one thing, everything magical. We always say this, like marketing isn't just like the silver bullet. If you just otherwise we wouldn't have agents. Like everybody would just know what to do because there'd just be one
There's
thing.
no get rich quick scheme.
Exactly, exactly. And I think advisors get that because
Sure.
it's the same for them, right? Like
Right.
they get it too. It's all about the long-term planning and the putting the time in and the investment and um if there was just like a get rich quick, then everybody would do it and they wouldn't be in business. So I feel like the two strains, the marketing and the advisor work is really similar in that way.
Yeah, I appreciate you setting reasonable expectations. I think this parlays itself really nice into one of the questions that we got is like, so what actually works? And you kind of said that in quotes earlier. And so I broke this down into a couple of key questions. What are the 2 to 3 like highest impact marketing activities advisory firms should start with?
Mhm. Um, well, first of all, depending on where you are in your sort of growth and how big your team is, I think the biggest thing, and this one's hard because it doesn't tie into ROI, um, but the biggest thing is what I talked about before is really having clear messaging, clear branding. We love to start with a brand book, and really getting clarity on who your target market is, how we're showing up to them, how our copy is going to sound different, how our imagery is going to sound or look different, all those sorts of things, and then making sure that as the team grows, that everybody has clarity around that and that there's consistency around that. So that's not really a tactic, and again, it's not a lead generator, but it's a key point, and then. I don't that was this one's hard because I don't know. I'm sure people want me to say social media or newsletter, right? Or a particular thing, but I think that the other thing that we want to take a step back and look at is, where your leads are already coming from. Um, and if there's only one or two, I'm now down to two. I guess one or two things that you want to focus on is just kind of turning up the volume on that. So for a lot
Yeah.
of firms, it's referrals, and so how are we client referrals probably, and so how are we communicating with clients and making sure that they understand the story of the firm, understand how you're solving problems, so that they can tell your firm's story well. I think it's things like that. So it's not a particular tactic, but just seeing, like I said, where growth is coming from and how we can align and continue with that.
I love that. And you had mentioned you talked briefly about KPIs. You hinted at that for a second, but I think this is really important. Obviously, I'm a operations systems processes geek and
Yes.
doing all of this for the sake of doing it. I think that's why it was frustrating at my last firm was like we did all this, but like there was no tracking. We had no idea what was working, what wasn't working.
Yes.
Maybe we had like our top referral sources tracked in the CRM, but like we were kind of just flying blind. And so
Yes.
I want to make sure that people understand the value of tracking and are clear on what they should be tracking and the difference between like KPIs that matter and vanity metrics.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. So one thing we do is as we're working with a firm, we will identify those specific KPIs. So like I said, figuring out the system, where what we want people to do. So okay, we want to be showing up in SEO, or we're showing up on social, or we're doing whatever. And figuring out the kind of the funnel, the old school marketing funnel,
Sure.
and then kind of pulling KPIs from there. So like how are we seeing people kind of move into our circle, and how are they interacting and choosing KPIs from that? So for instance, like the website, if we're really putting a lot of energy behind again SEO efforts or AEO efforts or whatever, then we probably want to start seeing more people come to the website. So, okay, that's just like the one thing we're going to focus on, or maybe the flip side is, okay, we have a lot of people come to the website, whatever, but we want them spending more time. We want them engaging longer. So I think it's just taking a step back and thinking like, well, what do we want people to be doing in when these different tactics are happening, like how do we want people responding, and then letting the KPI kind of relate to that instead of, like you said, just the vanity measures. Because it's one thing to just continue to, go back to leadership and say, well, now we have 100,000 people coming to the website and now we have 150,000 people. But if they're not doing anything, maybe we
Right.
have a newsletter that they're supposed to be signing up for or something like that. And if we don't have that tracking of sort of how people are moving, then
Yeah.
it's sort of irrelevant. So
We were just having this conversation internally because I sent an email a couple weeks ago and I got so many positive responses like, oh, this totally resonates. Like, oh, I love this. Oh, I forwarded this. And it's like, yes, we wrote a really killer email, but it didn't book any calls.
yes.
So like the message was received. And sometimes it's like, there's other things to take in consideration. Like how long
Yes.
have they been nurtured? Was it the first email they'd ever seen? Like,
Right.
sometimes the nurturing the timeline matters and where they're at in the
Yes.
timeline.
Yes.
But like this is why we all get all amped because we thought we had written such a good email, but it actually didn't do anything.
Well, that's the hardest thing about marketing is there is that layer of brand awareness and
Sure.
brand loyalty that you just can't track,
Sure.
So it still was a really good newsletter and hopefully people are sharing it, but maybe it's a question of like, okay, well, how can we build on that next time?
Right.
And also, actually looking at that newsletter and seeing like, is there a place that they were clicking or they weren't clicking? How can we move things around to get them to click on something more? Or maybe it's just sometimes so I'm speaking on behalf of our marketing analytics director, who's amazing at this, but sometimes it's like, okay, well, then we need to take a step back and figure out where the gap is,
Right.
so I'll just use your newsletter example, but it's like, well, maybe that's actually telling us that people who are in our newsletter are higher up in the funnel. They're not going to close yet. And we're using our newsletter, we're assuming it's bottom of the funnel, but maybe it's higher up. And so, how are there ways that we can continue to nurture them and move people down so they're not ready to book a call or, book a meeting or whatever, but maybe they're more ready to like hop on a webinar or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that's specifically your example because obviously you'd have to look at the bigger picture,
Sure.
but that's the kind of thing we can kind of look at is like, okay, well, maybe we're just treating this tactic like
And
inappropriately in the greater picture.
I totally get that. And I'm curious to know your thoughts then. Like when we're talking about it, a funnel, I said it in like a timeline, but when we're thinking about it as a funnel, I'm not a marketer, obviously.
I know. And I'm not always the biggest fan of the funnel because it assumes that every person is going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3,
But it's
4.
a
It
good
just doesn't
visual, I
work.
think.
Yes.
And so when we're like I want to get into the nitty gritty on the tracking. Like this, I get the KPIs, I get why it's important to track this stuff, but like how and where are we actually doing that?
You mean with the newsletter in particular or all the
Or
things?
yeah, I mean if you're doing newsletter and you're doing LinkedIn and you're doing Google ads and you're doing you repurpose it as YouTube content, whatever, you show up on all these different
Yes.
platforms. If I said, hey, I've got 50 grand to invest in marketing, how do I know where to put that money? Or like where are my most fruitful endeavors and where should I be focusing? We were just talking about like, pour your heart and soul into what works. How do I know what works? How are you tracking that?
Okay, well, so taking a step back to just sort of answer your last question of like what works. Usually, when people say what works, I assume they mean, like you said, people booking the call.
Of course.
So, oh yeah, exactly. So just checking. Um, so with that, I think that's where you just figure out like where are they coming in from. Um, and I feel like that's a bigger picture beyond the tactics. So like beyond like or is it greater than like are they coming from YouTube or are they coming from LinkedIn? I think it's a question of like did they come to us because they found us online somehow and then they were probably in the like digital ecosystem for a while
Right.
or did they find us because someone told us about that, or because you were on a webinar or something like that. So I think kind of taking it a step above the particular digital tactics and figuring out how they're coming in that way. And then with the tactics themselves, I would say, um, again, I think it's a question of less, like you said, the vanity metrics, less about like how many people are seeing it,
Sure.
and more about like how people are interacting with it. So, are they clicking? Are they engaging? Um, I'm a big fan of having, and it feels so old school. So I apologize to everyone on here that's probably like, I've heard it so many times, but I'm a big fan of like an opt-in or capture like a newsletter sign up, or
Yeah.
I'm having a webinar or something to capture them, because there's just when you're in the top of the funnel, there's just nothing you can do. You
Yeah.
can't like follow up with them. There's retargeting ads, but like even that's just kind of a little ethereal. So until you've like got them in some way, their contact information,
Right.
there's just no way to like really narrow down on that particular person. Um, so I don't know if I answered your question too about like specifics. Can you
You
ask that
did.
question
Well,
again? Okay.
and the call to action is important, capturing their contact information. At least then you can nurture the lead in a more personalized,
Yeah.
direct manner.
And
Um,
that's why I like newsletters, because
for sure.
usually you can actually see who opened it. Like Bob has been opening our last 5 emails. That's super interesting. So maybe we should follow up with a personal email to Bob or something like
Right.
that. So, which you can't get at the more top of the funnel sort of uh, activity. So,
Once they've started interacting with your stuff, once you've acquired their contact information, how, like, on the back end, how do you systematize the lead nurturing or like the sequencing to continue giving them what they're interested in the hopes of getting in front of them, whether it's like physically over Zoom or whatever?
yeah. So first of all, I will say there's a little bit of a disconnect for us. So we don't have access to the CRM side,
Okay.
which is generally like a compliance issue anyway. Like, firms don't want us in there for compliance sake. Um, so I would say there's two answers there. So number one, just from what I have control over, um, we're a big fan of some sort of drip sequence,
Mhm.
depending on this would all depend on sort of how they signed up and when they signed up. If they just signed up for a newsletter, I think a drip email sequence to them is going to look a little different than like they filled out a 50-page or 50 question, assessment quiz, that
Sure.
you're following up on, because there's two different spaces in the funnel. But I still think there's something to be said for following up with information like meet our team. This is our philosophy. Um, this is stuff we're doing, especially if you're super local focused. This is stuff we're doing in the community, because
Mm.
the people side is so important, especially in this business, right? It's all about the relationships. And so oftentimes that opt-in is more it's like a value forward thing. It's like, a tax guide or the newsletter or something like that. And so then being able to like flip it over and then share more about the people, more about the, relationships, and, why I started this firm, or, the story behind the firm, all that kind of stuff that just humanizes it, is super important. And then it also kind of keeps you top of mind with them. And then that's also, again, like I said, that's why we love newsletters, because you can continue that on a
Absolutely.
monthly basis. So,
I had heard, I was listening to a pretty prominent marketer talk one time. And he was saying it was extreme at the time. I was new in business, and he's like, give everything away for free and charge for implementation. And I was
yeah,
like, well, this is my baby. This is like my life's work. This is all my IP. I'm not going to give it all away for free. But I like what you said is when, you meet, or it's a webinar or a seminar, or it's some sort of like virtual interaction, or it could be an in-person thing, giving them something for free, giving them something that they can
yes,
take and apply to their life, and they watch it work, which builds trust. So the next time they have a
yes,
question around whatever, complex financial planning topic, or, their friends are talking about something they don't understand, you're the first person that comes to mind. You know what I
yes.
mean? And so
And
I've
I
watched
think,
that work over and over again. I think it's a really interesting
oh
idea.
yeah, building that trust is huge. I mean, there's so many like marketing psychology studies around that. And I think advisors are in a really great place to do that, because they can take it from a few different perspectives. So, I mean, the most, the heaviest, the most important value that an advisor brings isn't just the tactical stuff, right?
Of
It's
course.
the ongoing relationship, and I can call you if I don't know how to make this financial decision, or if my life, chaos happens, I have you to call. You can help me ride the waves. Like that's the real value. And so the tactical stuff, I think it's fine. And like I said, you're in a good place. So easy things to do are things like checklists. What financial document should you have in
Love
place
that.
for XYZ type of thing? That's easy. And it's not like, you're really not giving anything away at all. But even just guides, like I said, sort of tax planning type of guides. And again, this is going to depend on your target market and who
Sure.
you're, all your things. But what to do when kind of guides, I think are good. And then honestly, even just like if you didn't want to do like a ebook type of, digital PDF, like just even a video series, like we'll walk you through whatever topic you want to talk through. And we'll send you those videos. I think that could be really powerful. But yeah, there's so many bits of information that you're sitting on, and that's not why people, like about the Trump accounts and how those
Sure.
work, right? And that's just information you can give away, and your best client isn't calling you because you have that information and they can't get it anywhere else, right? They're calling you because they trust you,
Right.
but you can get through the door with that sort of tactical free stuff.
I love that. And that's the human piece.
Yeah.
That's what builds the initial connection. So when you share the human side and the people side, the
Oh,
right people
huge.
connect with you. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. We see this across the board. So, like, when we, talking about the data, when we look at the most visited pages on on any of our firm's websites, their team pages and like individual
Absolutely.
bio pages, always up there. If a newsletter has team information, it's always going to have a higher open rate. Um, Social media, the stuff about your team, always is going to do better than all the rest of the social media. So,
It's so
um,
true.
yeah.
And it's
That's
like,
that's the
oh, I
main.
love these people because they're local. I love these people because they sound like me, they look like me, they like my same sports team. They just you get the sense that you can connect with them on a personal level. And this is an incredibly personal topic that, they intend to engage on. So
I then and that's exactly it. I mean, when you're going to give your life savings to a firm,
right.
you want to feel like you know them, and there's so many ways to do it without feeling like you're invading anyone's privacy. I know we've had this conversation with a lot of clients where they're like, you know what, we're not really social media people. We don't want to make our advisors showcase their families and their whatever, but there's
Of
so
course.
many ways that you can get around that with not around that because I value that. I mean, I'm kind of the same way myself, but you can share about your people, pets and hobbies and where you went to college
Of
and
course.
we've counseled people on like share like what was your first job or things like that where it feels really personal like you're telling a story but actually like it's not giving away your social security number so
Right.
you know
Sure. No, I get that. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next section, all
Yeah.
around modern marketing trends. And you hinted at this, but I'm curious to understand this on a deeper level. Somebody asked, what's the difference between AEO versus SEO, and how are you kind of thinking about the two?
Okay, so AEO, well, I won't even try to define it because everyone defines these things differently, but it's basically like how AI search is happening
Mm,
versus how so SEO is generally just like how search is happening just on Google, Bing, Yahoo, whatever. And then AEO is bringing in all the AI search. There's also like GEO, like generative engine, or and then there's question. People say like question and answer. I think that's what the AEO is usually answer engine. So
okay.
anyway, we sometimes just call it SEO, like search everywhere optimization, because it's just there's just so many things and there's so many little abbreviations, and they frankly sort of drive me crazy because it just feels like jargon. The Our sort of philosophy on this is that there's definitely a shift. I mean, we all know this. We're all using ChatGPT to do things that we weren't before, but the foundation doesn't change. So what worked really well for SEO 5 years ago, last year, is still going to be your main drivers from a global perspective, main drivers for what works well with AEO, because it just comes down to really clear messaging and really clear. If you can be the one to show up to answer people's questions, then that's what does really well in search, and that's what does really well in AI. There are tactical, we can get into the nitty gritty about like if you write a blog, you should write it like this because that's how ChatGPT and Claude and everyone, scrapes and, how we can show up better. But for the most part, it's really, again, about what I talked way back at the beginning, like what's your most important is just getting really clear about what your messaging is and making sure that that's just everywhere. So that's in your social and that's in your Google business profile and that's on your website. And I really think the biggest takeaway is, just not being afraid to just draw the line at like, this is who we are. Sometimes we get really, we start to get, get this really nice brand figured out. And then everybody in leadership goes like, but we can actually serve everyone and do everything and do all the things. And you're like, no, 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 you have to kind of box ourselves in and say, this is who we are. So not being afraid of that. So, but yeah, we can get really nerdy and talk about all the nitty gritty differences, but for the most part, it's a lot of the same foundational stuff.
I think it's a really good explanation, and I've watched it happen in my own business where in the beginning you take anybody with a pulse, right? But then you end up
Yes.
accidentally taking people that maybe aren't the best fit, and it's kind of a difficult relationship. We've all had them, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
When,
yeah.
what I've learned through this is like with really clear messaging and getting really, really clear on who it is that we don't serve, it
Yeah.
became very easy to figure out who we do serve. And that messaging then became very clear and resonated with all the right people. And now we have an
Yes.
entire, like, we have an enormous pool of perfectly fit clients that we love. Like, we would pick
Right.
up a call happily. We would go to lunch happily. And so I
I
think,
love that.
as scary as that sounds to like say no and have very clear boundaries, it's the key to long lasting, um, just like ideal fit clients.
Absolutely. And it also sets you up well for, since we were talking about AEO and SEO, it also just sets you up really well for diving very deep into the questions that that particular client is going
Absolutely.
to have around, whatever your service is. So, the more you can be like, we serve this kind of person. And again,
Right.
it can be niches. It can be that, the traditional, or it can just be we serve in this way, or our investment philosophy is this way, whatever that sort of box is going to be. But then you can just go really deep and you can answer the same questions over and over in different blogs, or you're on podcasts, or you're on webinars or different things like that. And you're kind of just answering the same things over and over. And it's teaching all those AIs, that all the platforms, that that's what you're about, because it's just hearing it over and over. I think the struggle can be when we're trying to do so much and then you don't become the firm that does
Best in the
that.
space, the resident expert. And I'll
Yes.
tell you how that showed up in my business, which I think is really interesting and not unique to us at all. But I used to just basically newsletter and LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And then, I would do webinars with Redtail or Wealthbox or whoever, things like this. Um, and Redtail and Wealthbox would post on YouTube. And then
Cool.
all of a sudden, I started seeing that a bunch of our traffic was coming from YouTube. And then next thing I knew, there's like Reddit forums. And I'm like, I've never been on Reddit in my life. And I don't use YouTube. Like if my husband's gonna fix anything, it's on YouTube. Okay.
Yes,
Whether it's a
exactly.
car or a window, or we just got a new puppy and we're training a dog, like everything is on YouTube. I don't go there. That's just not the way my brain works. However, my ideal client and our target market are predominantly men, very similar to my husband.
Right.
And I'm realizing all those people are showing up coming from YouTube. And so I started posting more often on YouTube. I'm basically just repurposing, my newsletter and my LinkedIn content on YouTube, and people are
Yes.
loving it. And I'm like, I can't be closed minded to the platform because I don't use it. I'm not marketing to myself.
Yes. Yes, that's what I was talking about earlier too. Like I can't tell you specifically which tactic, but you
Yeah.
start looking at the numbers and you start seeing where people are coming from and you're like, "Okay, well then I need to show up there." But again, it's like you said, it's the same content. It's the same, you're showing up with the same answers that you were showing up with over here, and you kind of you get kind of tired of yourself.
I agree. Oh
But
my gosh, so bad.
yeah, exactly. But that's when marketing is working well. When we're talking with clients, they're like, but we already wrote about retirement planning. And it's like, okay, well, we got to write about it again from this other angle and this other angle and this other angle. And other people don't get tired of it. We joked about this about design a couple months ago on our podcast too. It's like the same thing. Like you get tired of your own brand, you get tired of your colors, and you're like, we need to add purple. But like no one else is tired of your brand. No one else sees it as much as you. So it's the same with content. No one
Why
hears it as
fix what
much as
ain't
you.
broken?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And yeah, it's probably not as boring as you think it is because you've got the answers. So.
That's really good advice, and something that's really hard to do. That same marketer that I was listening to is like the wealth is in the boring, or something like that. The reward is in the boring.
Hmm.
It shouldn't always be exciting.
It's it's really not. It's really not. But that's where those systems come in where you kind of know you planned it all out and you're like, okay, April, we're gonna do this, May, we're gonna do that. And you just
I
keep
love that.
going. Yeah.
What do you see the role of AI being in marketing?
Well, oh, and create from a generative perspective or
And
from
honestly,
a
the question is just very generic. So why don't you take us down whatever road you want to talk about?
okay, well, pop in here if you ask the question you just to shift it. Okay. From a from the perspective of people finding you on AI, it's happening all the time. Like we
Yeah.
have so many clients who are like, we have, we're seeing all this traffic come all of a sudden from ChatGPT or whatever, or they got their first lead from ChatGPT. So that's definitely happening. People are looking for their advisors or advisor information on the various platforms. And it's exactly what I was just talking about how you show up there is just being consistent. And again, there's very tactical ways. There's schema that you can put on the coding on the back end of your website to make sure you're showing up locally and all this kind of stuff. From the how to generate your marketing, we're not the biggest fans, um, because, and I obviously like, I'll just be honest, people are probably like, of course not, because you want us to pay you. But like that's I know that's what everyone's thinking. But there's reality too. We've seen where if you are trying to create blogs with AI, um, like we're already seeing it get suppressed and like they're not as getting the traffic that a human written blog gets. Um, I'll just answer the question from a video perspective. I've already told clients like we don't love that idea of making where you record yourself and then you give it a bunch of things to read and it just makes your videos because you can still kind of tell, and this is a trust-based business, and I feel like the first time a prospect sees that it's sort of robotic, they're out.
Yeah.
But there are ways, to use AI, like I said, in marketing for a research perspective. So, getting ideas for how can I write about retirement planning for the 50 billionth time? What other angles, what are people asking? So it's really great from that perspective of just, research and new ideas and things like that. So.
I love that. And it parlays itself into identifying your ideal fit prospect and getting really clear on that. And I'd love to hear you talk about this, but I want to share an exercise that I was challenged with because in my head I was like, oh, it's insert, who I thought my ideal client was. And
Uh,
then I act like then and I was within the ballpark, but I was still a little bit off. Okay. Then once I figured out who my ideal client or prospect was, I was like, what are their top three pain points so that I can start talking to those top three pain points, give them freebies and things to solve those pain points, get in front of them, earn their
yeah.
trust. And what I thought was their top three pain points were so far from their top three pain points. I actually
Yes.
took a handful of like intro calls and ran them through Chat GPT and said, hey, can you help me identify the top three pain
Yes.
points? These are my ideal prospect. And I was so far off. And so having a third
Mhm.
party perspective, whether it's a consultant or a true marketer or leveraging Chat GPT to give you those
I
insights,
love that idea.
eye opening.
Sometimes you do need that sort of objective look because I think we just kind of get into patterns, and we're used to, like I said, answering the same questions over and
Yeah.
over. And I think we don't like, and none of us, take the time to be able to kind of um, see, like you said, see what's actually bothering them and keeping them up at night. So I love that. That's a great
It's
idea.
interesting. And so, how do you help people think through identifying their ideal client or prospective client?
Well, I think that there is just the niche perspective. So, we're doing a lot of those hard conversations around like, do we need to focus locally? Is that important? Is that not important? Because it's so easy, I think, post-COVID and the Zoom era to just like we serve everyone in the nation. Well, is it really better for you to have people coming into the office? Like, does that fit you authentically? And um does that just feel right culturally? So then if it is, then they need to be local. Then your ideal prospect is local. And if they happen to be national, cool. But if you need to have that one-on-one time. So I think that, or the FaceTime. So that leads into what else I was going to say is, again, we can have the conversations around like we serve tech or we serve dentists or health professionals. And that's fine. I feel like that's the easier side, but the deeper side is the sort of cultural questions around
Mm.
what sort of values, what sort of, we've had conversations with clients where it's like, this type of entrepreneur and the reason they started their business, that's really our people. That's what gets us excited. So I think it's having that part of the conversation too around like, who are these people that you really get jazzed about working with? They're helping their families. It's this next generation wealth. So, and I think again, that it's just having those conversations and again making sure that leadership and everyone is on board. I remember we were having a client conversation one time, and I try to be very vague about talking about clients, but there's always this thing around philanthropy and charity. And they were like, you know what? I don't think that actually drives our clients. Like some of them do, but
Sure.
some of them aren't, that's not important to them. And like getting really real about that from no judgment. They were like, if people want to give their money away, cool. If not, not, but like having that light bulb moment of like, I don't think that's what keeps them up at night. Then we're not putting that out in the marketing. Like then that's not going to drive, our messaging because charitable giving just isn't the thing for your ideal client. There's other good things that they want to do with their families and things like that, but giving away to charity, that wasn't it. So, yeah, I think it's just like I said, having those conversations, but also again, really making sure that all the stakeholders are there because sometimes one
Yeah.
person's idea in the firm is not everyone's idea. So, making sure that we have everyone on board.
So once you have that level of clarity, we've got all decision makers on board with what, kind of the vision is, who the ideal client is. How do you ensure that you are in front of your ideal client? Like how do you ask the right questions leading up to that initial conversation to ensure that you're not wasting time meeting with not good fit prospective clients?
Mhm. I think the biggest thing is, I mean, so there is the opportunity to go in and, change contact forms and,
Yeah.
have, qualifier questions. And we've done that with some clients, like, again, where it makes sense and we're seeing patterns. It's so hard to give vague answers because like I would need to know what the numbers are. But
Yeah.
the biggest thing is, and this is just how our agency works. Like we work very closely. We have a directors team that works really closely. We have a design director, copy director, and we're all just constantly communicating. And so I think that that's part of it too, is making sure that all of your messaging, visual, verbal, copy really speaks to that ideal client such that you don't have to say what your minimum is, but it becomes obvious. If people are jet setting, like taking private jets, that's a different message than like, I don't know, a different imagery. So
No, a
making
retired
sure,
teacher. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think it's just making sure, and sometimes it's not like, again, calling out your minimum, but it's in your messaging, you're giving examples of things that they're doing, things that are important to them. Um, and even just I was going to case studies is a
Great
big way to
idea.
do it too. So that like just I can't think of any clients in particular that love the site. Most clients do not want to just be very like, we only serve this kind of people, just make it obvious. Because it just feels weird, but it's like subliminal messaging, just making sure
I
it's
get
kind
it.
of baked into the brand.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's a good
And also
recommendation.
also just calling out the problems. So, complexity is a big issue that a lot of advisors are solving. So making sure that you're calling out sort of the level of complexity that you're solving. So, if you're working with a certain net worth, they're going to have a level of complexity that you're there to solve, right? Certain, maybe it's donor advised funds versus trusts versus whatever, like whatever the layer of um, complexity is, that's another way to kind of talk about. So you're not going to ever talk about sort of I don't know, like the lower tier simplicity problems when you're there to solve the really complex ones and vice versa. If the really complex high net worth or ultra high net worth isn't your vibe, you're not going to talk about those problems. You're only
Right.
going to talk about these types of problems. So
And the
that's another
people
way
that
to handle
visit
it.
your website can like hear and feel themselves in the copy
Yeah,
and it
exactly. And the
resonates. And the
visuals.
wrong people,
Yes.
it will repel.
Yeah, exactly.
I got you.
But I think there is also a place if you're having, again, it depends on the client, but if you're having the problem where so many people are calling you and they just don't quite have your minimum, then maybe it's time to put something on your contact form or something to at least kind of weed them out. But yeah.
I think this is interesting. And this is a question too. Somebody asked about the connection between the client experience and marketing success. And I'm curious how you think about that because the
Mhm.
client experience for the jet setters, the ultra high net worth is different.
Yeah,
Their expectations are different than maybe the retired teacher. And so I'm curious how you think about that connection.
absolutely. So, oftentimes when I'm kind of showing the funnel, I will also talk about the importance of like after the conversion, there's things we should be doing, after conversion to continue to show up. So whether that's, client gifting schedules or things like that,
Mm,
or even just like when you're having your annual review, like what does your presentation look like and how does like, not only just the visuals, but also like specifically what's happening in that presentation and that portfolio review, like what are we covering? Um, Especially if I'll just say if we're working with somebody who is really trying to work on client referrals,
yeah.
like that meeting is super important that the client light bulbs are going off, that they're like, okay, yeah, you solved all those problems. I'm remembering now. Sometimes they forget. Like you started, the first 3 months in onboarding, you fixed all the loose ends and now they have peace. They might have forgotten. So reminding them, like, remember how stressed you were and now so that's important. And I actually jumped ahead. So even just the welcome package, the
Yeah.
who are you going to be working with, and are there team member faces in that folder, and just, it's all about validating their choice as well, so that they come on and immediately start feeling like, okay, I made the right choice. I see the consistency. I feel if you're a big team, I feel that team supporting me. It's not just the sales, the the advisor that was in the sales seat, but I have
Right.
this whole team supporting me. So, yeah, all those things. Yeah, super important.
I
Marketing
love that.
isn't, this is the biggest thing. Marketing is not just like the sales backup. That's a huge part of what marketing does is to back up the sales team. But really good marketing should serve everything in the firm. It should be helping to drive operations and making operational decisions. It should be cultural. Everything should be touched by really good marketing. So,
I love that. I could not agree more. Well, Tiffany, you have exhausted my list of questions. You are a tremendous wealth of knowledge.
oh, well,
I
thank you.
want to open it up, you guys, for additional just some Q&A here. We've got a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Tiffany, this is so helpful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to.
I got lots of little nuggets for my own personal business. I'm guilty of getting bored of my messaging and trying to
Oh,
share
we all do.
advice, and it's like, why fix what ain't broken? Talk about what the people want. You know what I mean? I think that's really good advice.
Yeah, we have the same problem sometimes.
Get excited.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can pop open my contact
Your slide. That'd be
information.
awesome. Yeah. So people have your contact information.
Yeah,
I'll
let me
make
share
sure
this.
that once there you go. That's great. Once the call recording is edited, I'll make sure that that gets out to everybody. Tiffany, I'll send you everybody's contact information too, so that they'll have your email address.
Yeah,
Um,
please just email me anytime. I honestly, I don't know if this is in the recording part or not, but I loved having these conversations. So I'm happy to just chat anytime.
it's fun. I appreciate you letting put you in the hot seat.
Yeah,
This is a hot topic and one that is outside of my wheelhouse. So I love being connected with other cool people that solve cool issues for cool advisors. So we've got a
yeah,
lot of overlap in kind of who we serve, and
absolutely.
I'm just grateful that I've known Lauren now for a couple years, that she was connected us, and that you've donated your time to everybody. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's a question. We're a team of five in five different cities with clients all over the US. We work remotely with offices. Work remotely with local
Uh,
offices in Charlotte. How do we encourage local and non-local prospects?
whew. Um, okay. So wait, you're in five. So I'm just making sure I understand. So you're in five. You can keep sending more messages here if I get this wrong. So I assume this means that each advisor can serve clients in each of those different cities. If that's the case, I would make sure that there's like a Google business profile for each one. Um, but now it says these local offices are only in Charlotte. What do you think, Kate? Do you think I have that right? That they
That
can.
Yeah, how do we encourage how do we encourage both local and non-local prospects?
Okay, well, if you really, so the tricky thing is if you do want those local prospects like come and meet us in Charlotte, I would make sure that that's very obvious on your website. You know, it's tricky with five because you can't like put it in your headline. But you can do this is a really specific tactic. You can do like a landing page for each of those cities on your site. It doesn't have to be in the drop down, it doesn't have to be under your about. It's just like a separate landing page. And Sarah, if you'll email me, I'll send you a example of what I'm talking about. Um, so it'll say like maybe one of your offices is in St. Louis. Oh, three advisors. Okay. Um, you could have like a St. Louis XYZ financial uh, advisors page on your website. Again, it doesn't have to be in the drop down or anything. It's just there for Google and AI and everyone to find you. And then, they go on that and then they are kind of led into the rest of the website. So that's one way to kind of, oh, good. I'm glad I'm making sense because it's really hard to say verbally. Um, yeah, that's one way to kind of get around the like you don't want it splashed all over your homepage because it's confusing. Like we're here and we're here and we're here and like where are you actually? I would also just get because you are spread out, I would also just get really specific about who you if there's a type of person that you serve really well or there's a service offering that you have, maybe you do taxes in-house or maybe you have a specific investment philosophy. I don't know, something that you or just makes you really different. I'd get really specific with that. Yeah, Sarah, feel free to email me too. I can give you more ideas.
Those are good ideas. What else do you guys have? These are good questions.
I know I like when they get really specific. It takes
Yeah.
me a minute though. I'm like, okay, I gotta think.
I like
Yeah.
that a bunch of people submitted questions ahead of time too. That made for a
Yes, thank you. It helped me
good
as well to
convo.
understand where we were going to go. I mean, like I said from the beginning, the hard thing with marketing is that just everywhere you go, everyone's going to tell you this is the tactics that's going to fix everything. And it's hard to, you can feel like you're just, bouncing all over the place. So the other thing too, and this might have been before we started recording, but it's the philosophy with marketing is the same with really good investing, which is just it's a long game and it's just continuing to show up over and over and doing the same things over and over, making those little tweaks along the way if things aren't working. But it's just the longer you're in the marketing game, kind of like the longer you're in the market,
Love that.
the better. So yeah.
Well, good, you guys. This was a really fun conversation. We'll definitely do another one. I like these casual AMAs. So,
Yeah, this is fun.
um,
Thanks.
if nobody else has any questions, we'll give everybody 5 minutes back in their day Tiffany, I'm so grateful for your time today and you sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with our folks. We'll get everybody follow-ups a little later on this week with the call recording. I just need to edit it.
Sounds great. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye.